being here with us. This is Susan Lightfoot-Schempf from the Wallace Center speaking. I am zooming in from New Orleans, Louisiana, and just want to thank everybody here from all over the country for joining us this afternoon for an hour to dig into the disaster and emergency relief available for farmers and food businesses via the CARES Act through the Small Business Administration specifically, but we'll also talk a little bit about the funding that's available through or that will become available through the USDA. I want to really especially thank the speakers who are with us today, specifically Yolanda Stokes from the Office of Disaster Assistance at the Small Business Administration, and also Jeff Salzer from the Northwest Arkansas District Office, also with the SBA. We have a couple of practitioners on the line. So we have Aleta from the Kentucky Center for Agricultural and Rural Development, and Todd Erling from the Hudson Valley AgriBusiness Development Corporation. And then also we have Wes King from the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition. So just a really stellar group of people that are going to be providing us with the most up-to-date information that they have on the situation. And I just want to quickly get a sense of who's in the room today. So Andrew, if you could quickly launch that poll. And just want to find out, are you a technical assistance provider? Are you a farmer, etc.? So let's just get a sense of who is in the room. So that poll should be popping up. I'm not seeing it, Andrew. Are you guys seeing it? No.
In the chat or where?
No, usually it comes up on your window. So let's see.
Looks like people are voting. I'm not sure.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. I wonder if it's like where would it be?
Not seeing it.
Yeah. Not either. Okay, well, best laid plans. We'll just skip that part. So if you want to throw in the chat box, maybe the hat that you're wearing today. So if that is a TA provider, if you're a farmer or a food business owner, maybe a nonprofit support organization, just trying to get a sense of audience. So thank you, that's really helpful. I just want to encourage the speakers to take a look at what's rolling in there in the chat box. I want to just acknowledge that I know that this is a really intense, confusing, and anxiety-ridden moment. And there's a lot of questions, and we only have 1 hour today together. So we are going to do our best to really provide you with the most up-to-date real-time information about where these programs are at, and really in the interest of supporting all the folks on the call who are helping food and farm businesses in their own communities really survive this economic crisis. I also just want to say, I know we're all under pressure. I feel you, we all feel it. It's okay to feel like that. And we can just take a calm, deep breath together, knowing that there's a bunch of people on this call who are all committed to ensuring that local and regional food systems survive and thrive through this moment. And just take heart in knowing that we're all in this together. I just want to give an overview, a little bit of the call. Wes is going to start us out by giving a high-level overview of the CARES Act, and then Yolanda and Jeff from the SBA are going to provide some information about programs that are available specifically through SBA. We also intend to share some tips and notes on how practitioners can really provide the best guidance to food and farm enterprises right now. So I want to thank Aleta and Todd for kicking off that conversation for us. And then finally, we'll circle back to Wes to hear a little bit more about the next steps and how we can be really good advocates as we move forward. I want to, let's see, I think that's probably about it. Just again, want to thank everybody who's here working to ensure that farmers and food businesses can continue to feed our families and our communities in this moment. So we appreciate you being here. So with that, Wes, do you want to give us the big picture here? What's the CARES Act? What financial relief is within it for local and regional food systems, and perhaps more specifically for small to mid-scale food and farm businesses?
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks for having me, Susan. Hopefully I don't have any bandwidth issue in my video off, so you can't see me because I've had bandwidth issues on other video calls throughout this week. So just jumping right in, as you sort of said, the CARES Act, I think everybody knows at the end of March, Congress passed and signed into law the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, or the CARES Act. If you hear anybody in conversations related to this say C3, that's also what they're referring to. Sometimes, looking ahead, people are also saying C4. So C3, C2, C1, these are all referring to the Corona Act packages that Congress has put together. C3 and CARES Act are synonymous. CARES Act, big picture, $2.2 trillion worth of aid. And 880 pages of legislative text. A lot of people know the big picture pieces of information or pieces of assistance that are in there: the direct payments to most Americans, expanded unemployment insurance, assistance to hospitals, lending to states, cities, and businesses, payroll tax changes, and funds to prevent small business layoffs. But as you were essentially saying, Susan, and I think everybody knows here, there are some provisions in the CARES Act that were targeted towards farmers and food insecurity. The most significant piece when it comes to agriculture that was included in the CARES Act is the creation of a new $9.5 billion disaster release fund to provide, quote, support for producers impacted by the coronavirus, end quote. That funding is specifically reserved for specialty crop producers, livestock producers, which includes dairy, and producers that supply local food systems, including farmers markets, restaurants, and schools. This inclusion of farmers who have sell into local food systems and have lost sales or markets or had market disruptions as a result of the pandemic is pretty unprecedented. It's a huge win for our community. There's nothing like it in history. And, I think it speaks to how far as a movement, the local and regional food systems movement has come. In addition to that $9.5 billion, there was another $14 billion boost provided to the Commodity Credit Corporation, which is this sort of obscure entity at the USDA that was created during the Great Depression. And really, this is where most of the funding for USDA programs comes from. And it's where the funding for the mitigation trade payments to commodity producers came from over the last couple of years that the USDA has paid. Having all this money in there is great. With the exception that USDA wasn't really provided much in terms of guardrails or directions on how to divide up the funding, which farmers receive priority, and how the payments will be structured and delivered, which has been creating a pretty big challenge, I think, for the advocacy community, for the local foods community, as well as for the USDA as they try to figure out what to do with this funding. In addition to that, commodity credit funding and the $9.5 billion disaster fund, there's $100 million for increased rural broadband projects. There's significant resources for rural business lending and funding for rural telemedicine and distance learning, along with a bunch of cash for emergency operations. One of the things the USDA is struggling with is it's a lot of work to respond to this. So the bill included a lot of additional just operational funding for the USDA. Lastly, there was some significant resources for nutrition and nutrition programs included in the CARES Act. There was $100 million for the food distribution on Indian reservations. Unfortunately, not a lot of administrative flexibilities that the tribal communities wanted. There was a lot more funding for the emergency food system as a whole. And lastly, there was increased funding for the SNAP program to absorb the expected additional people that are going to be enrolled in SNAP. However, to the chagrin and disappointment of INSEC and all of our partners in the anti-hunger community, that increased SNAP funding did not include an increase in the minimum monthly SNAP benefit or an increase in the meager benefit for $1.40 per meal for SNAP producers. All of things that I think a lot of folks in the broader food world, but also local and regional food systems community are going to be looking to address in the future. All right, there you go. I hope that was in 5 minutes. I know it was a lot of information to try to squeeze in there. Hopefully that helped set the stage for drilling down into some of the small business provisions and how they impact local and regional food systems.
That's perfect. Thank you, Wes. And I just want to note that my colleague Annalena at the Wallace Center is taking copious notes, and we will send those out to everybody afterwards. So Annalena, if you want to drop the Google link in the chat box, people can also follow along. So great. So with that, why don't we shift over to Yolanda and Jeff from the Small Business Administration, and just hear, if they could give us a deeper understanding of the SBA role in this disaster assistance, and specifically the PPP, the Payroll Protection Program, and the emergency or the Economic Injury Disaster Loans, which the SBA is responsible for. So Jeff and Yolanda, y'all can take it from here.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Yolanda,
This is Yolanda Stokes, and I am with the SBA Office of Disaster Assistance. I'm out of the Field Operations Center West, and we are located in Sacramento, California. Our office is responsible for responding to all disasters in the 26 states west of the Mississippi, including our U.S. territories. And I'm going to be sharing information on the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, or you'll hear the acronym EIDL for short, and you've probably already heard about the EIDL Advance. So I'll be sharing with you information about the two programs, and we'll go right into the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. Provides up to $2 million of working capital to any of our non-farm businesses, our ag co-ops, nonprofits, sole props, and any independent contractors. So that's, again, up to $2 million. Low interest for the nonprofit is 2.75%. The interest rate on for-profit businesses is 3.75%. The term is set at 30 years. So we do have several tools that we use to make sure these loans are affordable. There's a built-in 12-month deferment, no loan payment for the first 12 months on all COVID-19 loan applications. We have also waived the requirement for any personal guarantees or any loans that are under $200,000. In addition to that, we have also waived any need for real estate collateral or on any loans that are under $500,000. In addition to that, we have been expanding, you probably have heard, our programs. As a result of the CARES Act, the component that changed for SBA is that we're now providing up to a $10,000 advance, and you've probably heard of it referred to as a grant. And essentially it is a grant, it does not have to be repaid. That up to $10,000 is essentially a advance on your economic injury disaster loan. So if you are a business who needs that full $2 million, then the first $10,000, if you're granted the full $10,000, does not have to be repaid. Now, the advance is predicated upon the number of employees. So it's basically $1,000 per employee up to essentially 10 employees or a maximum of $10,000. The economic injury advance does not have a stipulation that says that you have to use it for payroll. You can use that if you happen to get the $10,000 for any payroll costs, certainly, or sick leave, salaries, any rent or mortgage payments, any material costs, or any pre-existing debt. We have streamlined the loan application. So if I have any business owners who were proactive and applied right away, and you applied under the original electronic loan application portal, you probably have a loan number, our application number that starts with a 2. And you may have already received an email from SBA stating that you now need to go into our new streamlined application to apply. And the reason that we're asking you to reapply under the streamlined application is because the advance option was not included on that first application. Additionally, the streamlined application is just that. It's very, very simple. There's no need to upload documents. We're not requiring personal financial statements. We're not requiring tax returns. So you're basically, the business owners are going to self-certify. You want to make sure that on that last page of the application, and don't worry, you won't miss it. There's an application page step 4 in the process that will specifically ask you, do you want to apply for the advance? Of course, everyone should check that box. It's going to ask you to enter your routing number and your bank account number so that we can make that direct deposit for that advance amount. So we're encouraging everyone to apply for both programs. As we go on throughout the remainder of the call, there will be some wraparound programs that are going to filter into one another so that we make sure that we have our businesses covered at every angle. Certainly, you know, there may be some overlap as Jeff goes on and shares with you about the 3P program, the Paycheck Protection Program. There is a requirement for you to use the proceeds for payroll, but we don't want our business owners to get bogged down into that right now. We just want you to access all of the programs that are available to you at this time. So with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to my colleague, Jeff, and he'll share some additional details on the payroll protection program.
Hey, thanks so much, Yolanda. The Paycheck Protection Program, again, you know, the spirit of that law is designed to help you keep your employees, and you're able to actually go through your local bank as long as they're participating SBA lender, and at this point most of them are, and apply for that. And you're looking at your real payroll costs. The great part about that is that's a loan, a 2-year loan at a 1% interest rate, but the entire loan can be forgiven if you utilize at least 75% of the proceeds to pay for payroll costs, and then the rest of the proceeds for the loan to pay for lease payments on your facility or mortgage interest payments and utilities. And again, as Yolanda said, what we really want to do is make sure that you're applying for everything you can. Now, there is a little bit of a sticky spot there where on the idle advance, you can't use the proceeds of the advance for the same thing that you're using to pay for with the Paycheck Protection Program. But it's a phenomenal opportunity for small businesses. I mean, even at just a loan face value without the forgiveness, a 1% loan, that's pretty close to free money. But again, remember, it's designed for you to keep those employees. So the SBA is going to be looking at payroll when you started, and then what your payroll expenses are when you ended. You want to make sure that you're hanging on to those employees. And we know things are troubling and you know right now, but these programs are really, the money's getting out. I've talked with folks that have gone and actually gone through the process and gone into the bank today and signed on them. So despite some hiccups and folks feeling things are not moving as fast as they'd like, the money is getting out into the system right here in Northwest Arkansas and across the country.
Great. Thank you for that overview of the programs. I know we have quite a few very kind of specific questions about them. So I'm just going to spend the next few minutes addressing some of those questions. So first and foremost, I know that within this community in particular, there's been a lot of questions about requesting the idle if an operation files a Schedule F and whether or not farms are eligible for this advance. Yolanda, can you speak to that?
Yes, that is correct. If you file a Schedule F, you're not eligible for the program. However, our farm-related businesses have some eligibility there, so I know it can be a sticky point. But yes, if you file a Schedule F, then you would utilize the programs available through USDA.
Okay, Yolanda, I understand that there's some clarification in terms of that piece. Are you able to provide any sense of the conversation between SBA and USDA around that, or is it still unclear at this point?
It's still very unclear, and I don't have any definitive guidance on that, so I wouldn't want to speculate on that.
Okay. I know there is a, let's see. There's been a common question that we received in emails, and it might be here in the chat box also. And I'll ask Elizabeth if you can help me with some of the questions in the chat box. But specifically, if labor costs that are paid through labor contractors are considered part of the payroll costs for the Paycheck Protection Program. Maybe that's a question for you, Jeff.
labor costs, basically 1099 folks?
Mm-hmm.
No, I mean, we're looking at true employee costs. So the thought process is those folks that are getting a 1099, they're independent contractors, so they're in their own business. So they could apply for both the EIDL and the paycheck protection on their own. And that's the latest guidance I've got. But if you think about it, it kind of makes a lot of sense. If you're a 1099 worker, you're obviously writing off expenses and paying your own self-employment taxes and those things. Yolanda, do you have anything different than that?
No, I don't, Jeff. That's correct.
Okay, and similarly, are H-2A workers being treated as employees in either of these programs?
I'm going to raise my hand. H-2A, are those, is that a visa classification?
Yeah, that's temporary agricultural workers.
They fall under the
okay.
guest worker category, Jeff.
Sure, thanks so much. I appreciate that. I'd rather be embarrassed than be dishonest. So my question would be, are you doing withholding for them and doing a normal payroll? And if that would be the case, then I would take that documentation down to the bank because those are going to be those are going to be what your payroll is, and that's how that calculation on the PPP is going to work. So and there are provisions in there for seasonal workers as well. So I would say if you're running a traditional payroll program and there's withholding with it, absolutely go down and apply.
So there's two caveats there I just want to throw in that we heard through Farm Credit. One is the individual has to have a primary residence, the employee or the 1099 business has to have a primary residence within the United States. So that often right there short circuits it. Aleta, have you been hearing the same thing? And I've heard it through several different sources kind of working through this system.
Yeah, that would be our conclusion as well, since they have to have primary residence in the United States. And we've had one business that has been told by the lender that not to include H-2A labor. So.
Not to include H-2A?
Yes, it sounds like that's what Aleta in Kentucky had been advised. Okay, so another question that's come up multiple times is if a business that is based on a farm but is separate from the farm business, so such as a value-added processing or agritourism business, apply for EIDL, even if their tax return includes both a Schedule C for the non-farm part and a Schedule F for the farm part.
Yes, that's correct. They would be eligible, that tourism business or maybe a retail business would be eligible to apply for the economic injury disaster loan for both the loan program and as well as the advance.
Okay. Elizabeth, is there anything else in this section right now that I should make sure and pull? I know there's a lot of questions coming through.
There was a question earlier about whether or not accessing these SBA programs might affect farmers' eligibility for any FSA programs. Yolanda or Jeff, have you gotten any indication of that?
Well, with what's typical with federal programs, is particularly this disaster with it being so widespread, there may be some overlap in the programs, but the programs speak to one another. So there may be some duplication of benefits, but we try to prevent that where we can. But we're encouraging everyone to apply for any program that they feel would be suited for their business and this recovery effort.
Mm-hmm. We also had a question come through prior to the call today about businesses that were just getting started when the COVID outbreak hit and that have been put in a particularly difficult situation. There was a message from a nonprofit that was planning on opening a food hub in March. They had already hired their employees in preparation for launch, but now with COVID, all of their market channels have closed and the entire year's fundraising has been canceled or postponed. So they have no revenue coming in. Would businesses such as this new food hub that were just starting operations when COVID occurred, and this is a business entity, not a farm, qualify for EIDL?
Yes, as long as the business was in place before January 31st.
That the business was in operation or that the legal entity had been formed before January 1st?
The legal entity was established prior to January 31st. They're
Okay.
eligible to apply for EIDL.
Great, thank you. Let's see. What is the start date of payroll that SBA is looking at, and then the end day that they are looking to compare that with? Me, Jeff, is that a question for you? And Elizabeth, I don't know if there's a clarification on that question.
It is, and I've seen it, and I'm embarrassed because I don't have it in front of me. But we have a start to the disaster, and I know that it's going to go out, 8 weeks out. And that's something that the bank will. The great part about the Paycheck Protection Program is that you're working with your bank on all of this, and this is your local bank. But the answer is I just don't have the document right in front of me. I don't have it memorized, and I'm sorry. I'll be happy to email that to you. And
if I could piggyback on Jeff's comment there, as far as the economic injury disaster loan application, each business owner is going to be working hand in hand with the loan officer from SBA, and they're going to look at your past trends and your financials to determine just how much working capital you're going to need for the next 3 to 6 months. So you'll be working hand in hand with the loan officer to determine how much you're going to need to cover you for the next 6 months or so.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. I know we've had a number of questions also come in around farmers markets, and there's one in the chat box about a farmers market that is run under a county chamber of commerce with vendor fees that are very low, relying on grants and business sponsorship for the majority of income to cover expenses. So there's no legal employees, but is this kind of operation eligible for support under EIDL?
Yes, they are. And you mentioned that they were run by a local chamber of commerce, if I
Yes.
heard.
Mm-hmm.
And our chambers are applying. The chambers qualify under the nonprofit, most of them. So yes, we are encouraging our chambers to apply, and they would be eligible.
Yolanda, can I have some clarification on that one? We had been told only C3s qualified, and most chambers are C6s.
Yeah,
that level of.
Yeah, we've had quite a few questions and conversations regarding that, and I know that most chambers provide some type of marketing service and/or lobby, but we're just encouraging it. It doesn't cost them anything. We're encouraging everyone to apply. As you all know, policies with SBA are changing very, very fluid as a result of this disaster. We are changing policies and programs to expand to be able to help more and more businesses. And hopefully, we may even have something come up to help our farmers in the end. But yeah, our policies are very, very fluid. There's no penalty whatsoever, no fees involved in applying. So we are encouraging all of our chambers to apply.
Great, thank you. Just one final question. So regarding the payroll protection program, we've already heard from local banks that they aren't taking any more PPP loan applications. Is there a concern about these funds being used up soon? Is time of the essence here, the first come, first serve?
And I've heard some anecdotal, I've heard some of the same things that you heard. I think it was, one of the morning shows said that they were out of money. We're not out of money. We're lending. I don't know what the dollar amount is right now. I've gone call to call today, but Yolanda might be able to tell you where we're at. And then there's additional legislation in the pipeline for additional funding. I can empathize, especially being, here in Arkansas, we've got a lot of farmers, we've got a lot of agribusiness, and a lot of folks are frustrated because of the tempo and pace of information being sent out. But we're literally writing the rules for legislation that was done a week or two ago and dealing with the disaster that's going across the country. And to kind of piggyback off of what Yolanda said, get into the system and apply, because what you can't do is you can't get the 2 weeks back that you waited and wondered if you could apply. So just apply, and then if it doesn't go through, that's fine. There's no penalty, there's nothing. But the rules are also fluid and changing. I wouldn't be super worried about us running out of money. And the administration is committed to the survival of America's small businesses. You're committed to their survival. We're all working together. The chambers, the state governments, we're all working in tandem. It is a very fluid situation. and I can completely understand the frustration when, you know, you hear we're still waiting for guidance. But the reality is nobody thought that there'd be a disaster that covered all states and all U.S. territories. So bear with us, folks. We're doing the absolute best we can, and we're passionate about America's small businesses because, you know, I've owned one. We shop at them. These are our friends and neighbors. So it's frustrating. It's a difficult time, but we're going to get through it, and we're going to get through it because we're doing it together.
Well, thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that. And I think with that, what we'd like to do is switch over to Todd and Aleta. And just want to appreciate both Yolanda and Jeff for being on the call. We are going to have more time for questions in a little bit. So let's maybe shift the conversation just slightly to two practitioners who've really been on the ground helping their food and farm businesses access these programs, and just ask you if you could maybe share what you've been learning so that you could help others on the call provide the best possible assistance to farmers and food businesses in their communities. So maybe we'll start with you, Aleta.
Sure. And I'll be really brief, and if there's questions, I'm happy to answer them, or if you want to contact me offline, I'm happy to, because we are all in this together and there's lots of questions. So our approach has been very much, we're a technical assistance provider working primarily with farmers and ag-based businesses on business plans, marketing, feasibility work, financials, that kind of thing, grants and loans. That's who we are. We work statewide. We knew when these programs were coming together that it was going to be way too much for us to consume in one bite. So we are triaging the programs to focus on the ones that we feel are most urgent and most applicable right now. And then when we feel like we've done enough outreach on those, then we'll move on to the next program. So with regards to the Paycheck Protection Program and the EIDL program, for us, it really was to focus heavily on the Paycheck Protection Program because that has clear eligibility for agriculture. The EIDL obviously does not. And there is confusion about that. I noticed in the chat section, somebody said, my lender is saying that, you know, they're waiting for more guidance. Have your lender, I'm not sure who you should have them call, maybe the SBA office, I'm not sure. But I've had this conversation with another farmer as well. They sent them actually material we put out. But certainly there's a lot of information out there that you can send to your lender and say, no. And there's a lot of misinformation out here. We are eligible. So anyway, so we focused heavily on Paycheck Protection Program. What we did is we looked at the businesses with whom we work and which ones we thought would be good fits based on the following. Does the business have a payroll that we know of? Does it have positive net earnings from a sole prop? Because those are going to be the two easiest ways for individuals that we work with, businesses that we work with, to access that program. Was it in business as of the date, which is February 2020? And this is a judgment call for us, but again, we're triaging. We're trying to get the best help out there to the most people so that they can be helped. And one question our staff is asking themselves is, does the business maintain adequate payroll or other financial records to be able to both justify the loan request and then demonstrate forgivability? And that's just something that will make their life easier long-term. Most people who are going to be operating a real payroll will be able to demonstrate that because they have to pay payroll taxes and all of those things. But certainly we would have some concerns if they didn't have enough financial records to do that. So which businesses do we work with that we see applying? And we have a lot of them applying, and they've applied heavily in the past 5 days or however many. And we started taking calls on it on Friday, took several calls over the weekend on it. So we do have agritourism businesses that are applying, meat processors that are applying, individual farmers that are applying, diversified farmers that are doing CSAs. So it really runs the gamut. But if they meet those criteria, we think they are the best fit for the program. We describe what the program is. We tell them to reach out to their primary lender. But we're also letting them know that many lenders just don't have a lot of information right now, and that, you know, what we're seeing is people are trying to build a plane while it's taxiing down the runway, and that you've got to give people, you know, some space for that because it is challenging. But what I would also say is that, you know, that is very challenging because what you see happening, and while I hope that more money is included in PPP, what you see happening is the larger banks we're the quickest to go, boom, online portal, let's make it flow. And a lot of your smaller community banks and banks that a lot of our farmers use were not quite ready for that onslaught. I think they're getting there. I'm encouraged by a lot of what I'm hearing now, but don't let people be discouraged because of that first conversation, because it may not be the last conversation you have. There's a lot of misunderstanding about this program. People are saying, well, I'm not sure if it fits me. I don't know if I've been hit hard enough. You know, I let them know that the thing they're checking off on is current economic uncertainty makes the loan necessary. That is the rationale for the program. Okay. So anyway, we talked them through payroll costs. Some of the issues we have seen, I mentioned, you know, the H-2A issue certainly has come up. Lenders being caught flat-footed, just because this, again, is coming together so fast. So that's happening a lot. The other major piece I would say as a technical assistance provider that I would emphasize, because we do it, is we really emphasize we're honest about the uncertainty that's out there, and that we're going to try to provide the best advice based on what we're seeing in the regs, what guidance we see, what webinars we see, what information we all share. And we really try to use what businesses are telling us to help other businesses too. And so we put out blog posts that's like Q&A about this. And so that's a way to take information that's told to us by business, make it anonymous, and then help other people understand it too. So that's a good thing to do, like on Facebook or websites, to help other people understand it. And then the final thing I would say, we are not getting hung up on any one particular program. I mentioned we're focused on PPP because there was the sense of urgency. It went live. We knew ag was eligible based on all of the information we saw. And we know that the EIDL program is not a good fit for many of our businesses. They may be a fit for some, and we'll work through them, but it's just not going to fit a lot of them. So we're going to focus on that one first. But we also have to keep in mind, one, there is the other USDA money that's out there. There are FSA programs. We don't want people getting too hung up on, well, darn it, I'm not eligible for this. What does that even mean? Let's look at the big picture. Let's look at the total picture to see how we can get through this time and what other programs we could fit in there. But at the same time, I will acknowledge that, you know, putting a lot of your focus on one program at a time may help you think through how you help people through that particular program. The final thought I'll say, and somebody mentioned this too, you know, there is a lot of concern about duplication and making sure that you're not using this program for this purpose and vice versa. What I would say is what we have seen is it's all about the purpose. And so as the business owner thinks about what they are applying for and the expenses for which they're applying for, what they want to safeguard is that they're not applying for the same purpose, the same expense in two programs, because that's where you're going to run afoul with the federal government typically. So just something to keep in mind. And with that, I will totally turn it over to Todd. Sorry, I went over a couple minutes.
No worries. So I'm Todd Erling. I'm from Hudson Valley AgriBusiness Development Corporation. We're a regional non-for-profit that works in the Hudson Valley. We actually have multi-year contracts with 8 different counties from the metro area of New York on up to the Adirondacks bordering the Hudson River, along the Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Vermont border. And with that, I just want to echo some of the things that was said. I think Aleta did a great job. You know, a lot of this is triage, and a lot of this are multiple fronts at the same time, and not either or binary hierarchies. That's a real challenge right now for not only service providers, but also for individual businesses. And we're working very hard with our New York delegation on the potential for including farmers into EIDL so that farmers have that choice if it's a tool that's appropriate, while at the same time that we recognize additional funds are needed across the boards, EIDL, PPP, clarification on USDA, FSA, and you know, the C4 package that Wes referred to earlier. What I do want to say is we've focused heavily here on federal programs, and at the expense sometimes of what's happening for each state, what's happening on a county or individual town or city end, and even what's happening with philanthropic and private community foundations. I don't have the answer for that for everyone. Those are all case-by-case situations. In the Hudson Valley, we're very fortunate as the fact that agriculture, food systems, craft beverage, farm-dependent, farm-related business is considered economic development and community development. And so we are working hand in glove with our individual SBDC, Small Business Development Centers, and SBA intermediary lenders and technical advisors, and those are typically on county levels. We're also working with our individual county economic development offices, and then the traditional suite of services that many of you have across the country, which are extensions, soil and water offices, land trusts and land conservancies. So those various organizations all have different priorities and also all have different potential funding sources. And don't miss an opportunity by focusing on only on the federal opportunities, because we are seeing community foundations creating funds to pay farmers to be putting food into food insecure or school lunch programs and meal programs that are continuing to working. We are seeing individual counties redeploy some of our food hubs to be cross-docking opportunities so that farmers can still get product down into New York City instead of individually sending family members and employees down. So the creativity here and the response, while is overwhelming sometimes with the challenges, we all need to be working together as a community to memorialize what some of these out-of-the-box solutions are and share with it. So this type of forum, the listservs that we are all a part of, please use this as an opportunity not only to pivot, but also rebuild and reimagine what we're going to do when we come out the other side. HVADC does have very specific technical assistance programs similar to the Kentucky programs, where we identify attorneys, accountants, business strategists, marketing experts, to help individual businesses one-on-one. And some of those things we've had to pivot on. Funding opportunities are always a hot topic, especially this time of year, but transitioning from farm to institution, farm to restaurant, to direct market, to farm to institution, to other farms. So just keep in mind this idea of the pivot opportunity. And the last thing for us, I'm going to tie it up with this, is in the Northeast. We know that this is a shoulder season in the Northeast. Things are starting to wake up. And we are having opportunities where farmers markets are still open and essential businesses, but require the social distancing and the protocols for safety, not only for the customers, but also for the farmers and the employees. If we can get a handle on this now, in the early parts of the season, we can start to build this as corporate culture and food system culture for the rest of this food year. And we need to really embrace that idea that it's not going back to normal. It's how do we pivot and rebuild and not create a pandemic, vulnerable solution, and seeing these things coming. So in New York and the Hudson Valley, we are fortunate to have direct market consumers, direct market culture that is stepping up and taking the place of many of the farmed institution and restaurant opportunities, but there's still a significant concern about what it means when we come out for labor, what it means when we come out for people having the dollars to purchase the food, and how we start to pivot some of the support programs in C4, C5, and state responses to make sure local food, local producers are holistically included in this, both from a market opportunity, but also from a funding and labor opportunity. I'll tie it up with that.
Yeah, thank you, Aleta and Todd, both. Really good, wise counsel there from both of you. So just quickly, before we open up into a conversation and more questions, I want to invite Wes to tell us a little bit more kind of like where we go from here, especially around advocacy, to ensure that we have local and regional food systems centered in all of this discussion and recognizing the essential nature of the food and farm enterprises and keeping food security in our communities. And specifically, you know, what's the call to action for us, and especially as we head towards that fourth stimulus package.
Yeah. Thanks for giving me the hard question. And I say that because this is my answer now will probably be a different answer tomorrow, which is probably a different answer than what I would have given you earlier in the week. And that's because, as I think everybody acknowledges and understands, this is such a dynamic situation that's constantly changing. So the first thing I would say in terms of a possible, at least short-term call to action for those who are on the webinar, I am pasting in right now a link to a sign-on letter that we're organizing. We launched this on Monday. I'm amazed we've already had 1,000 organizations sign on. But what it is it's a letter we're directing to Secretary Perdue. We're planning delivering, what is today? We're planning on delivering it tomorrow morning. So not a ton of time to sign on. But what this is trying to lay out a proposal for him on how to make sure that local food producers are included as part of that $9.5 billion fund for direct assistance, and talking about some of the things, the priorities and principles we think need to be included in that in terms of, you know, paperwork simplification, not requiring a farm service number, recognizing that many in the local and regional food space don't have farm service numbers. I'm not going to get into all the details of the letter. You can read it, but I would encourage people to sign on to that. That's the most immediate action opportunity. And we're also engaged as an organization behind the scenes with allies and friends at the USDA to share these ideas. And we've been talking with USDA since last week about the design of this program, as well as working with folks in the Senate. So that would be the most immediate action step. Where things go from here is really where the big, I don't know, ask me tomorrow, it may be something different comes in. Earlier in the week, it seemed kind of like things were sleepily lurching towards a C4 package coming together by the end of the month, with a lot of the offices we were talking to saying, you know, we don't quite know how it's going to work out. We haven't gotten directions, but get us your ideas. Start giving us your ideas. We want to start thinking about them, looking at them, and seeing if these are things we could support. Now, suddenly, since Mitch McConnell started talking about the need to add more funding for the SBA programs, it's really sort of turned everything on its head. Democrats are now pushing and jumping, saying, well, you need to do this, this, and this. And it's really unclear if we're going to get what we were earlier today calling Corona or CARES Act 3.5, C 3.5, so something in between of a C3 and a C4, or is that all going to fall apart? And then are we going to get a super rush over the next 3-4 days to actually put together C4? It's really hard to say. I wish I could give folks a really strong call to action. We're trying to turn our ship in the direction of putting out some of that kind of information in terms of a call to action about what we would like to see in C4. But yeah, we're just not there yet. But I can tell you, you know, some of the things that I think will resonate that we're really focused on is, as a big picture priority or principle, is, you know, how do we make it so that all of the produce or locally produced food that had markets destined for schools or restaurants or wherever that might be now doesn't have markets, and those farmers are scrambling to find places. How can we get that into the emergency food system? It's one of these weird, mind-boggling issues that we're dealing with right now, that we have farmers who have product and lost markets, and we have an emergency food system that is struggling, and they're particularly struggling when it comes to nutrient-dense food. we need to be figuring out how do we connect these two pieces. That's one of the things we're going to be really, and I'm going to be really focused on in terms of the local and regional food systems work as part of C4. And then also a thing that I'm really interested in is food safety. Farmers are incurring lots of costs to retool their operations to this new reality. Is there something we can do to support farmers doing that, as well as the organizations they're operating through, whether it be through a food hub or as part of a farmers market nonprofit? How can we provide them the resources to support setting up these new systems and doing it in a food safe coronavirus context?
Great, thank you, Wes. Sorry for giving you the hard question, but you gave us some really good points, or at least a direction to go. And I think, I just want to point out that Elizabeth did put that sign-in letter in the chat box, and want to encourage everybody to please get your organizations to sign on to that today. I believe it closes at 6 p.m. Eastern. So please be sure and get into that. And also, Wes, just to the point of utilizing and leveraging emergency food funds to support farmers now, that's an area that we really want to be lifting up. Innovations and kind of new collaborations that are emerging. We've been hearing about folks that have gotten those kind of projects going already, at least at the county and city levels through the Office of Emergency Management at different areas, whether it's city, county, or state level. So we're going to be pulling together a call to share up some of those examples over the next couple of weeks. So looking forward to working with all of you in that space. So with that, I think, Elizabeth, I'm going to see, are there some questions that could kind of kick us off into this next section? I see, Todd, you're unmuted. Were you about to jump in there? Go for it.
I just think we need to take this opportunity to enforce or request USDA to pivot the way SBA did. I really appreciate the SBA representation on the call. I recognize things are being clarified on the move. We're not only, building the birdhouse or reading the instructions on the treadmill, we're also doing 4 other things. And the bottom line is, some of the things like the cash advance, like the waiver of personal guarantees, like the flexibility on collateral, and the opportunity with performance metrics to be converted to grant. It would be amazing if we could have a federal partner in the USDA and FSA to step up like that. The other thing is portal. Having a portal and doing this, I commend the SBA as hard as it has been. The access that you have provided. If all of us could just be pushing that towards the USDA and the FSA funding, not only for CARES Act, but for 3.5, 4.0, whatever we're looking at here, and C3.5 and C4. We all need to take advantage of rethinking the tools we're using to access and supporting the federal agencies and the federal employees to help them move into 2020 and the response to Corona.
Great, thank you. As Stu says in the chat box, here to that. So really want to appreciate the SBA representatives on the line today. Elizabeth, something from the chat box to kick off in a Q&A?
Sure. Well, first, the question on everyone's minds, this call is being recorded, notes are being taken, and we will share that out. Another question that has come up is confusion about if EIDL is not available at this time to farms. What are the farm service agency programs that farms can apply for? And do they have similar terms to EIDL?
I am going to imagine that that's going to have to be a follow-up call because that's a lot of information. Aleta, do you have any quick response to that?
I'll give you a quick response. They should contact the FSA county offices. There's direct ownership loans and operating loans. They typically have very reasonable loan rates. 2.75 was the last one I was quoted. There's a microloan program that's for less than $50,000 that has less paperwork than the larger loan packages. So they do have some options. They don't want to ask about the disaster loan for FSA because an FSA disaster loan has other requirements that aren't going to apply here. But the operating loan and ownership loan ones through their farm service agency, they could ask about.
Great, thank you. Let's see, there was another question earlier related to farmers that don't have payroll and rely on family labor, and how they should approach the payroll protection program. Jeffrey, Yolanda, do you have any suggestions regarding farms that don't have payrolls?
So we would look at that like we would self-employed folks. So you would go ahead and it's all based, they're doing calculations based on the taxes, but take your information down to the bank, and what they'll be able to do is kind of see what the equity or owner's draw is coming out of the business, and that's how that would take care of it. On family labor, boy, if they're not paying them, that's going to be a tough one. So one of the key things we're going to need is paperwork somehow. So if I paid my son, I'd go to jail because he's 5. But if I paid my son to do work over $500 a year, I need to capture that in a 1099. So if there are 1099s going out to the individual family members, then absolutely they can go and apply as individual business owners. And that's the level of best advice I can give you. I know it's not always the answer you want, but I'll always shoot straight with you.
We appreciate that, Jeff. You know, I do want to point out, there's a comment earlier from Eric, just a concern seeing that the more sophisticated business owners are able to jump at this, while the smaller, and in his case, particularly Native Hawaiian operators have been more tentative about applying, if they even know about it. And I see a lot of nodding heads, and that's certainly true for a lot of the smaller farms in our communities. And I'm just curious, Aleta and Todd, Jeff and others, if you have any suggestions around that. I think one of the things that we've also heard is that if people aren't active lenders at they don't have a relationship with an SBA lending partner in their community, that they're having a really hard time getting those conversations. So any advice that you could provide around that?
I'd love to key off of something Todd mentioned, if you don't mind, and that's the small business development centers or small business technology development centers, depending on the states. Folks, there's a legion of government-funded consultants out there between the Women's Business Centers, SCORE, the SBDC network, and they'll help them put that information together. On the EIDL loan program, I mean, that is super, super simple. When I've had the time, I've walked people through it in as quick as 5 minutes. And on the PPP, if you get a small business that's not sophisticated, and I know for a fact that Hawaii's got a great SBDC network, you can go into the SBDC. They can, virtually, and help you prepare all the documentation you need to take to your bank. If you don't have an existing relationship with the bank, you can go to our website and you can put in your zip code, and it'll show you participating banks. And we're adding new banks. I say every day. I imagine it's every couple of minutes at this rate. And that would be my best advice for those smaller businesses.
I would add a couple things there. I think, this opportunity to access other alphabet soups, non-traditional alphabet soups. So we're talking about SBDC, Small Business Development Centers. We're talking about CDFI, Community Development Financial Institutions, which are going to be coming out the other side of the CARES Act with significant TA and direct funding for new loan and grant programs. USDA, FSA, all very comfortable for many producers. But I would argue, many of our minority producers, women-owned enterprises fit the mold very well with small business development centers, community development corporations, local development corporations, this priority of diversification. So I think this is a great opportunity to introduce many of our farm and small food businesses to the alphabet soup of the agencies and funding corps. It can be overwhelming and they all fly off the tip of our tongue, but this is the time to say, wait a second, what, PP what, or EIDL what? It's okay, because everyone is trying to learn and pivot. So please don't think of, farms are only USDA or farms are only, soil and water. There is a whole range of agencies right now, and I think Jeff hit the nail on the head. We're all in this together. And if we can get the local food system to be accepted and supported by economic development and community development agencies, organizations, and holistically included, we're going to come out of this in a much better position than we went into it.
Great. Well, great way to close us up there, Todd. Thank you. Just want to note that Wes had added a link in the chat box about a blog that INSAC did about the Farm Service Agency's changes related to the whole CARES Act and COVID response. So please take a look at that. Just want to note too, I know there's a lot of questions that didn't get answered. We will do our best to pull some answers together in the Google Doc, the notes doc, and send that out to everybody. And just really want to give a lot of appreciation to the speakers today, Aleta Botts, Todd Erling, and Wes King, Jeff Salzer, and Yolanda Stokes. Just really appreciate y'all turning on a dime to be here for this community of 200 people that showed up today from all over the country. So thank you all. Good luck to you. Please stay healthy.